Another way of thinking about it really is that folks with PhDs are going out and finding jobs in all kinds of spaces. More traditional spaces that you might expect, like writing and editing. You know, you did your PhD, you're a great writer. But other places like consulting, you know, research admin, student services. Well, we'll see a few more in just a few minutes. So to start with, I like to frame talking about this issue by thinking about where you are right now, which is sort of in the middle of grad school, thinking about often walking kind of a narrow bridge towards a goal. The truth is according to a recent NSF survey, about 80% of graduate students think that they are going on to tenure track positions. And about 20% of those graduate students actually end up in tenure track positions. And that's across fields. So if you happen to be in a field where that's more challenging, art history, for example, I'll pick on that because that's what, you know, the president has been picking on. Art history, that's a challenging field right now to get a tenure track academic position in. And so a lot of folks in that field are actually being really creative and figuring out some of the other spaces that they could go into. Again, you know your own discipline better than I do. My discipline's in education. You know your own discipline and what the prospects are. And hopefully you've been talking to people and keeping your eyes open as you go. If you have been keeping your eyes open, you've probably been seeing some statistics and some headlines like these, which can feel a little disheartening when you're in graduate school. You know, concerns I meet with a lot of graduate students. I hear concerns about adjunct living, lack of health insurance, struggles in what seems like endless postdoc after postdoc, or visiting professorships, where you just can't ever quite break in. And so these are the kinds of things that lead a lot of people to consider non-academic careers or alternative academic careers, which is sort of a non-academic career that's still based around a university. So if you've seen these headlines, and if you're here today, most likely you've considered some of these issues already. And so the model you might be thinking about might look a little bit different. You might be thinking about your academic career as more of, you know, tributaries or trickling out into lots of different places that you might go. You know, I think initially when I put this up here, I was thinking, oh, they'll see this as like the tenure track jobs, but I think tenure track jobs are more like here, actually. They're one of these trickle down sorts of floods, one of these directions that you could head to as you follow these various paths that you might explore during the course of graduate school. Many people explore these paths after graduate school, right? Or 2 years later when they've had a lot of trouble on the academic job market, and then they're saying, what can I do now? And a lot of communities actually have been built up online to address this need. But I'm here to tell you today that the earlier you start imagining yourself as possibly in a non-academic or an alternative academic career, the better off this is going to be for your future. The most miserable, frustrated students that I meet are the ones who were on that, I am going to be a tenure track professor until the very end, and I meet them their last semester of graduate school after they've been here 6, 7 years. And the idea of taking a non-academic position is heartbreaking. They're all full of the academic Kool-Aid, and they can't imagine what it would be to value research or teaching that goes on outside of the academy. So again, even if you're here today and you're thinking, well, tenure track really is my goal, that's where I want to end up, but I'll learn about some options, that is a terrific step. If you've made that step and you're thinking about it, that's a terrific step to make. That's going to help inoculate you against some of that struggle at the end if the tenure track position doesn't work out for you. So there's sort of 4 different areas that I'm going to focus on. I do have to go through them kind of quickly. Things that you can help yourself do here today that would help you think about the non-academic or alternative academic job market. So the very first thing, believe it or not, is to search for jobs, which initially makes no sense, right? You think like, I'm going to search for jobs when I need a job at the end. You're going to search for jobs now. You're going to search for jobs if you're a first-year graduate student. This is the way that you understand what is out there. There's a couple of different ways you can search for jobs. Actually, there's a bunch these days. So I put up a few of the most popular. There's the traditional sorts of career sites. So CareerJet, Indeed, a lot of our students use Indeed, Monster, Glassdoor. You can find your favorite, but most of them allow you to search by area and type. So if you're a molecular and cellular biologist, you can search for research scientists, you can search for molecular and get things, you can search for a lot of the different keywords, you enter them in. Same thing with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a social media site like Facebook for work. You don't put personal information on there, but rather a professional sort of profile of you. It's familiar maybe more to the folks in the sciences than in the humanities. I have some humanities folks that are on it, but not a ton. Again, it's something that we can, in our office, help you sign up for. But on LinkedIn, once you develop this profile, it actually allows you to do an advanced search to find jobs in your area and by geography. So the advanced search function is right up at the top. Where, they have, just like with Facebook, there's a little magnifying glass kind of area. And you can click on advanced search. It'll open up a ton of different options for you for searching for jobs. Once you have a really robust LinkedIn network, or maybe you already have one, if you have that, you can actually do some cross-referencing and find people that you know that may have a connection to that job. Often that's better for a second or a third job within, say, industry. And then down there at the bottom, you can see Twitter. Twitter is great, particularly for the humanists, the digital humanists. Any community that has sort of built up a grassroots sort of following, Twitter lists a ton of jobs. If you can join Twitter, you don't have to join it as a, I'm tweeting what I had for breakfast kind of person, but you can join Twitter and be a reader. You can join Twitter and follow lists of people that show jobs, including this one is, the Scholars Lab, which is such a cool place for a digital humanist. So places, again, non-academic jobs, you can sort of make the jobs come to you a little bit. LinkedIn will do that as well. If you can make the jobs come to you, even if you're a first or second year graduate student, it's sort of always on your mind, this alternative route, this alternative path. You're thinking about it. You're imagining yourself in it, which really, as somebody who went on to get a non-academic career or an alternative academic career, imagining yourself in that role is one of the hardest and most important steps that you can take. What would that be like? So, as you can see, there's lots of different places you can look, but I meet a lot of students who, frankly, don't know what they're looking for. Sometimes in STEM, it's more obvious, and they're thinking, well, I could go into industry. You're in pharmaceutics, or you're in some of the other, molecular and cellular, a lot of people go into industry. There's a lot of places in STEM where you might go straight into industry, and that's understood and comfortable within your department, even if the path is not so easy to get there. The humanists struggle a little bit more. They say, who else wants what I do? And actually, that's sort of a myth. Humanists are trained in writing and communication and all these kinds of skills that are tremendously valued in the marketplace right now. But it's hard to imagine, what are those jobs? So there's actually a great place that you can look for them. Raise your hand if you've ever been on the Versatile PhD site. I'm just curious. Oh, great, terrific. So some of the people here have already checked this out. This used to be a listserv, a sort of casual group for about 10 years. I think it was called Work For Us or something. And it was a group of PhDs who were getting together and supporting each other online to try to develop, non-academic career advice and support for each other. And it grew and grew and grew, and eventually now has been turned in the last few years into Versatile PhD, which is a subscription site. The nice thing is it's free to students. You can go on there right now and get a lot of information. And the really nice thing is the Graduate College is getting us a subscription starting in July. So you'll have access, all of you, for free to all of the premium content that you can read, and I'll show you in a moment what the premium content is, but it's really, really nice stuff. It's right now probably considered the best online non-academic source for support, developing your resume, getting advice, reading about different fields and different options. So the way it works is, as you go, you can go to the Versatile PhD page, and this is just one area of it. It looks like a regular homepage. But when you click on this area, you can see on one side humanities and social sciences, the other the STEM fields. you see where it says choose an HSS career, Humanities Social Science career. You'd click on that, and what it opens is actually a long list. It's not even this page yet. It opens a long list, maybe 15 different top careers or areas of careers, writing and editing, publishing, consulting, research administration, all these kinds of careers, and it lists them. You can then click on an individual career and read a description of that career, get a sense of whether your personality and outlook fit with that career. I always think that's a great idea for something like consulting, where very specific personalities work well in consulting and are often drawn to it. But if you don't know what that is, how would you know if you fit it? So you can just learn a little bit about what that career is. Then on the side, the premium content, as you can see, sort of goes down here. This right here is a panel discussion with people already in the field, sort of like what we'll get today. In green, you can see the stories, the hiring stories of people who were actually hired in that field. You can read the job ad often. You can read their CV, their resume, their cover letter, and their description of how they found the position, how they networked, who they talked to. And it's really terrific, these green ones. And I don't know if you can read back there, but this one says, molecular medicine PhD hired as a AAAS fellow, pharmacologist hired as a science policy analyst at NIH. Over here we have historian hired at a humanities institute, English PhD hired as a McNair advisor, which is sort of a student services type activity. Communication PhD hired as a graduate career counselor. English PhD, or education PhD hired as a graduate career counselor. So you can get a sense of these different stories. And then down here, these stories in the light tan are almost 5 to 10 years out. These are some of the older Versatile PhD members who have gone back and written about the transition as a whole. So in green, you find the younger ones and their brand new materials. In brown, you find somebody who's done this a while back, and they can walk you through the whole thing and see. Because I think a lot of people wonder, where will I be? What will it feel like in 5 years if I make this decision, or 10 years? So this is Versatile PhD. Again, you'll have full access to the premium content starting in July. If you find something that you like, you go home and you look through this, you find something you like, email me, please, and I'll find a way to get it to you as a PDF. So I can get in there and get access and pull it from our sample and send it to you so you can see it now. Not everyone can wait until July. So the next step that I'm going to talk to you a bit about is network building. I'm going to have to go through these kind of quickly. You hear this idea of networking a lot, and talking to people at parties, what does this look like? Of course, much networking now is done online. And for me, a lot of networking that is really effective is done through joining groups and participating in those groups online. So LinkedIn has groups in your field. Twitter has groups in your field. Certainly, meeting with other graduate students, a big part of it is not losing the non-academic contacts you had before graduate school. Graduate school can be like blinders sometimes. You forget, oh yeah, I do have that cousin working in industry, but why would I ever talk to them about their job? It's really important to keep those non-academic and alternative academic contacts going. An easy way to keep them going is through social media, through something like LinkedIn. Most people in the non-academic, or certainly in the business world, already have those LinkedIn contacts. You can connect with them. You can occasionally drop them a note that way. You can see them. It gives that sort of sense of still being connected, so that when you do come around to possibly looking at non-academic careers, you already have those connections in place. Networking is not fast. It doesn't work in your last semester. It's something that really is best done over time and built up over time. Networking, of course, for some graduate students, it's really comfortable, and all the people in your life are beautiful, smiling people like this. Everyone's like, oh, they look terrific. Networking also, for me, can feel like this. It's just, a little bit overwhelming. I felt really comfortable in academia and in my graduate program. I don't always love getting out and talking to people about what I do. The thing that saved me, and my work felt very esoteric and separate from everything. And the thing that saved me really was coming up with sort of an elevator speech of what I do, a 1 minute, a 2 minute elevator speech. and giving people the most, pretending I'm talking to, my grandmother, and giving people the most basic sort of hands-on functional description of my research, and then asking them about what they do. And this is something that saved me over and over in a tough networking situation. So the other part of networking that can be really useful when thinking about the non-academic job search is something called informational interviewing. Has anyone in here ever done an informational interview? Okay, great. So a few people know, and they've done these. An informational interview, which sounds like a very businessy term, is actually just going and talking to somebody about what they do. Making an appointment. It's a director of a humanities institute. It's a associate director of a university teaching center. And you make an appointment. I'm thinking of Lisa Kelly here on campus. She's a brand new hire, has a theater PhD, came here from Northwestern to run our teaching center, to be the associate director of our Center for Teaching here on campus. She's really friendly. You can make an appointment with her, have 15 minutes with her, or half-hour coffee. She'd run out and sort of answer a lot of your questions about what that search was like. I mean, she went through a complete job search. This was something from scratch. She wasn't an insider to this position. And she'd tell you sort of how she worked her way there, what she did in grad school to prepare for that. Informational interviews. What do you do here? The other thing you want to do during graduate school is think a lot about skill development and what skills you could develop that might be useful in another area. So be strategic about your skill development. This doesn't mean take up every opportunity that comes about during graduate school, because graduate school is hard. You do need to keep your eye on the ball, right? But being strategic about what skills could add to your strengths, the strengths you already have and the things that you already enjoy, and picking up some of those skills along the way and taking advantage of those opportunities is, again, going to help you down the line when you go to apply for those non-academic positions. So people often say to me, what are my, I don't know what skills we're talking about. Employers report these skills. Recently they were talking about, PhDs are terrific with content knowledge. This was a big survey that was done down in Virginia. But we need, what do we need? We need teamwork, project management, that elusive term, project management, which so many PhDs are terrific at but don't always know how to sell. Oral presentations to layperson audiences. So this is that idea of being able to do an elevator speech or talk about your research to somebody who's not in your field. And outcomes on time and on budget. Again, all things that people with PhDs should excel at. If you did a dissertation, all these are part of it. So as you can see, I put up some of the areas, I'm not going to read through these for you, that some of the areas that PhDs really excel in. You can kind of take some of these. You don't have to be somebody that picks up every single area. But if you look up here, you can probably find a bit of yourself, right? You can sort of find an area where you hang out, maybe 2 or 3 areas, and things that could be developed over the course of your work. So the last one I'm going to talk to you about, actually, is maybe the hardest, and maybe what I would consider the most emotional piece of thinking about non-academic and alternative academic careers. And you don't see as much of this on the career page info or on you see some of it on Versatile PhD in the panels. But it's another sort of area, and it's just this idea of thinking through who would you be in a non-academic position. And this is surprisingly difficult once you've been to grad school. Maybe you could have done it before grad school. Before graduate school, I was a school teacher. And then I came to graduate school for all those years, and somehow that idea then seemed very, very strange. I had left that, and I imagined myself in a different space, and imagining myself as something other than being a professor was somehow very sad. And I'm not the only one. I meet with lots of graduate students. I just met with a whole group a couple weeks ago and had a similar conversation, and their frustration was just palpable of how sad that felt. And there's nothing wrong with that feeling sad or frustrating if that's where you thought you were going to be. But it is a problem when that sadness or that frustration comes out in a job interview or in a new situation. It's something that actually takes some time, and I think takes some patience with yourself to work through and talk through and come up with a narrative that really works for you. So I think that ultimately a lot of it is about storytelling. And I'm going to give you 4 possible stories here that I've heard regularly from PhD students, but your story may be different. Again, there's lots of reasons why it's hard to tell a positive story. I mean, you thought the job market was better than it is. You know, you thought you were going to get one of these jobs, and now you can't, and now it's been sometimes you graduated and then 2 more years, and you've been living on an adjunct salary and with no health insurance, and now you're pretty bitter. Underemployment, you feel like, the job that you thought you could get, you can now only get a job that's just sort of a shadow of that. Visiting positions, but you'll never get into that tenure track position. Endless postdocs. What word did I read last night? Postdocalypse, which was, and you feel underemployed. So all those things, or you just feel that idea that I talked about earlier, which is, who would want me? Who would want these skills? And some positive stories that you can tell really have other sorts of pieces to them. So up here you can see the climber, and I think of this story always as, a PhD was part of my path. It wasn't an end goal unto itself. My husband tells the story. My husband is a high school teacher, has been for 14 years. He got his PhD. That's part of his path. He didn't expect to leave his job. He didn't expect to go on to a different field. Even if you did leave your job for a while, maybe you'll return to a related field. And your PhD was something that helped you rise in your career. So that's what I call the climber there. This guy here, he's taking a break. This is what a lot of folks do. They sort of explain their transition as, I'm taking a year off and trying some other things. If this is comfortable for you, this might be a nice fit. I hear a lot of people use this. It can be a good story to tell and say, I'm trying something different for a while. I'm doing a year of writing and editing. I'm doing a year of this. I'm doing 3 years of this. But I may change and sort of keep it up in the air. You can see here the woman with her kiddo. This is the other story that I hear a lot from graduate students, which is, I'm looking for a really healthy work-life balance, and I don't think I can find that in academia. I hear this. You might think I hear this from women. The picture would make you think I hear it from women. I actually hear it from men a lot. They want families. They want to not move every 4 years. Women too. It's, some folks have just decided that in their particular field at this particular time, they can't be healthy in academia. And so they've made this other sort of alternative decision. And then finally over here you can see, so I call like the passionate narrative. She's a passionate teacher. She went to graduate school and she determined that what she really loves is teaching. And that's what she wants to focus on. The research was nice, but it's not her thing. Or, oops, I did it again. Or you're really loving research. I mean, a lot of students, they come in and they're so nervous about telling me that they hate teaching. I hate teaching. Turns out, I didn't know this, but I hate it. That's a great thing to know about yourself, right? That's a lot of good information. That means that there's a lot of other kinds of careers that are open for you, that are exciting, that are interesting, and now you know how you're not going to end up making yourself miserable in 5 years, right? How you're not going to get caught in that cycle of doing something, waking up each day doing something you don't enjoy. So, with that, I'll remind you that your questions, your thoughts about this, help with this is all available to you up at Gilmore Hall. You can see right here that you can book appointments with us. You see that we do funding as well. This is what I've done for several years, external funding services, helping people write grants and fellowships. And these are our career service appointments. We have a variety of different ones that you can do, get things reviewed, come in and talk and search with us, and talk about where you want to go and what your plan is. Sometimes it's just helpful to bounce your plans off somebody else. Maybe you have an advisor that you can do that with, but if you don't, we're there and comfortable chatting with you about those ideas. And all of this can be found at the Graduate College homepage, www.grad.uiowa.edu. And with that, I think we need to set up for our next presentation. So thank you very much for listening.